Um, all right, so this is number three, visual poison. All right, sigh, break, breathe. Oh, visual poison. What do I mean? Well, this is simple. It goes back quite a ways, actually. And John asked me to talk about things I'd learned recently. And so here, this is a combo. I didn't learn this recently. I learned this a very, very, very long time ago when dragons roamed the earth. And but I'm going to show you an example that is just from today that will show you how this messes up the communications likelihood. You're trying to get a message across to people. And are you actually effectively, we call it communications, but it isn't communications unless the person on the other end is actually absorbing it, receiving it, hearing it, perhaps acting on it, all of that. If it's just a message, that's just you in broadcast mode. So how do you turn your message, your broadcast, into an actual communication? So this book, Type and Layout, was published. This is the US version, the first US version, and it was published by Mal Warwick, the great legendary Mal Warwick. He's not dead, so he's not, I don't want to make him sound like that much of a legend, but he created a fabulous direct mail firm out based in Berkeley, California, worked for all of the Democratic candidates for president in the United States. So for those of you who are outside the US, that's the liberal side of things, and the good guys, not the black hats. And that's who Mal is working for. And he goes to Australia and runs into what is essentially a pamphlet. It's a long pamphlet. It's basically a white paper, and it is the research done by this guy, Colin Wheeldon. And Colin Wheeldon was a magazine editor. And at that point in time, there were all these discussions. People didn't know. They just didn't have the science. They didn't know which worked best, this or that, right? So, and this whole book is about answering those questions in the laboratory, which works best, this or that. Here, we are focusing exclusively on the question of, is it better to print your text black on a white background, or can you print your text white on a black background? Because it does seem like, a flip of the coin. And with certain designers I've worked with and then mostly fired, they think it is just a flip of the coin. They don't actually read the text anyway. So, what do they care? They're just trying to make stuff look pretty. And I do demean that small group of people I've fired, because I fired them because they just wouldn't switch. They just couldn't get beyond this. So here's the research. Text printed black on white, comprehension level 70% good. Text printed white on black, comprehension level 0. Those two things, those two numbers, are all you need to make the communications world spin. That is gravity at work, right? Mm-hmm. So you can take a few words and dramatize them with white on a darker colored background, like you see here, bigger, faster, better. This is from a case for support for an emergency room at a community hospital. And these are the promises that this campaign was making: bigger, faster, better. And, we try to study success. What do I know about this particular campaign? Well, I know it had a goal of $20 million, and it went over goal to $23 million, because people in the community didn't want to have a heart attack and have to get into an ambulance and go 45 minutes up the road to the next hospital. They wanted to be able to be fixed in their own backyard. And they didn't think they would survive a visit to the local emergency room until it was rebuilt. So bigger, faster, better. That was the promise to the community. So a few words are okay in reverse type. But then you have this, where you have a design choice where people think, okay, it's pretty if we put, this part of our messaging into this reverse type against different colored backgrounds. And I'm sure they had a ball choosing their palette here. And it is a beautiful palette. I mean, it would look great on I don't know, in a condo or something. But then you're trying to convey to me within seconds. And John mentioned 3-second rule. Within seconds, you're trying to get a message across. Well, it's simply not going to happen if you take what is called body copy, which is your smaller type, anything, 14, 16, 14, 12 point, that is called body type, and it's what your articles are set in. And these are little articles, these are micro articles. If you put your micro articles into reverse type, you're basically poisoning the water, making them impossible for most people to quickly absorb. Pause.
I have so many thoughts about that, but
John, would you please enter your thoughts into whatever you come up with?
I just like this is an argument that I have had for years with mostly marketing comms people. Like we're always looking for maximum contrast, basically because of Colin's research. I have two copies of his book, two different editions. I like it that much. Um, black type on white paper, I understand from a design aesthetic is one of the most boring. It's like your slide. This is one of the most boring pieces of design you will have ever seen in your entire life, but it is maximum communication and maximum comprehension because it's easy for me to see and read. It's not about being pretty, as you said, Tom. And again, it's an argument I've had many, many times through my career where people said this looks too boring because I'm going for maximum contrast, maximum readability, but doesn't look pretty enough. And like
I
Colin
think
said,
so.
like many of
I,
us,
I,
we're not here to design pretty pictures.
I'm looking at this as we speak, and it is, I mean, you could call this boring, I suppose, black on white. But on the other hand, it's using Times New Roman, which is the most used face in the English language and was designed for the London Times back in the 1930s in order to have a high X height, as all these things, what I'm talking about. And so that in small type sizes, it was still pretty legible.
Mhm.
So the newspaper is not going to, I mean, you have plenty of 80-year-olds reading the newspaper, but the newspaper is not going to bow to their bad eyes and produce everything in 14-point type the way you might in a nonprofit um, fundraising appeal. They're going to do what they have to do, which is squeeze as much as they can onto the page. And so they created their very own typeface in order to do that. And that's what you see here. The autonomy, connection, and competence set in Times New Roman. Now it could be set in, I could have reversed that and it wouldn't have been any less instantly legible because it's 3 words. And in fact, I could probably choose a typeface that would make it really pop. And you'd be like, oh man, that's so beautiful. And it would be. And then if I went to 10 words, I'm already in trouble. If I go to 20 words, I'm in the La Brea tar pits and so forth. So anyway, shall we continue?
Yes, please.
Is this actually doing it for you, John?
Very much, Tom. On every level, please believe me. This is
All
great.
right.
I love
All
it.
right. I didn't know, because I hadn't seen any of the others, so I didn't know what you were looking for. All right. So pausing, pause. Autonomy, connection, competence. Where do these things come in? They came into my life relatively recently probably about 2017, 2018, 2019, just before the pandemic. I was working with two people, Adrian Sargent, who was professor of marketing, and a psychologist named Jen Shang, who specializes in the behaviors of donors. And Jen was passing along some fairly common, I soon learned, uh, thinking that is current in psychology, which is that human well-being is based on these three things: autonomy, connection, and competence. Autonomy being I make my own decision, connection being I'm not isolated, and competence being I feel like I can get through the day and not screw up terrifically much, that I'm basically good to go. All right. And um, so as it says here, it repeats that at the top, but and it repeats that at the bottom too. You feel like you're making your own decisions, part of something bigger, you're faced with a challenge, you get the job done. What I ran across, this was out of LinkedIn, which is my social media of choice these days because it's relatively um, adult people in the profession talking about the profession professionally rather than screaming at each other. And they will dig deeply into issues. And here we've got Kevin Brown, who I believe runs a creative agency in South Africa. And he's contributing in LinkedIn that your funding pitch, that is what you're saying to a prospective donor, should include three things in his view: the problem, the solution, the outcome, right? That's his quick checklist. There are other checklists. They might throw in the problem, the solution, urgency, and then the outcome, and or the problem, the solution, urgency, affordability, and the outcome, whatever. These are just checklists so that you don't forget one of the essentials. So the problem, that's where the connection is made. So I'm saying to you, the world needs you, and here's why. And then I'm saying that's the problem, but we can solve that problem if you act on your autonomy and consider joining us. That is, make a gift, volunteer, sign a petition, do whatever it is we are asking you to do to get past your inertia. And then finally, the outcome, that's we're together with my gift through some organization, some terrific organization that I trust and believe in. We have competently solved a problem. However, and there's always a however, Kevin is saying most of the time the pitches sound instead like, here's our solution, here's our solution, here's our solution, our solution, our solution. We are not leaving room for the donor to exercise autonomy, connection, and competence, the essentials, the three pillars of human well-being.
Very good.
Okay, direct mail response rates. You ready?
Oh, yes, very much so.
Yes, direct mail response rates, DM response rates. So I have the privilege, the honor of being able to talk to pretty much anyone I want to talk to. And so in this case, I approached 10 different experts who run agencies for the most part or are frequent flyers as direct mail writers, and asked them, so what would you anticipate would be a good response rate if you were sending out an appeal? Now, we were thinking about just kind of a no frills appeal. It's in an envelope. There's no premium. There's no tote bag. There's no magnet. There's there's nothing like that. It's just a straightforward appeal. And The question was, okay, you've got two different lists because you've been intelligent and segmented, and you're going to either your cold list or your warm list. The cold list are people who have never given you any gift in the past, right? Or they could be what has been called a lapsed donor because they gave at one time, but they haven't given within the last 12 to 18 months. And then the warm list are the people who have given within the last 12 to 18 months. Different groups of people completely in terms of how you talk to them and what you put in front of them, and far more important, what you can expect from them. Because what we're trying to frame here, and in part this is to help charities that just don't know decide, is this for us? And a lot of times, you'll have wild expectations for success that have no basis in reality. So you might be thinking, well, if we sent it to 100 people, maybe 100 people would say yes. And that's never going to happen ever in your life. First of all, between the time you decided on that, these 100 people, one of them dies. And so you're sending it to a dead mailbox. It's just life goes on, right? And that kind of churn happens. You're talking about maybe a 30% churn in your mailing list every year. So the cold list, what can we expect? So I'm asking, and all these experts, these are people deeply, swimming in data. So they hate having an answer to this. They just hate it. But they will, if you, present them with enough exit doors, say, okay, yeah, all right, here's what I think. If you sent out 100 to 200 emails, not emails. I take that completely back. He sent out 100 to 200 appeals to postal addresses. That we call that an acquisition mailing for those of you that are brand new to the industry. How many gifts are going to come back from that? And the general answer was one gift would come back from that. Not only was that the general answer, but that was the answer that allowed you to pop open that cheap champagne that you've had inside the refrigerator for so ever long, and take a couple of sips because you've had a good day according to the industry. What happens when you switch to your more warm list? And these are the people that have made a gift in the last 12 to 18 months. So it's called, and that's just a working definition. That is not like physics, but it's a working definition. That's your warm list. So they've made a gift. You're appealing to those people again, right? And you're sending to 100 addresses this time. From 100 addresses, the consensus was that somewhere, and you can see the range is enormous, somewhere between 5 to 20 gifts might come back if everything else you've done is perfectly wonderful. Maybe 30, and this is John Lepp right here, I'm holding him accountable. Maybe 30 if you're mailing during the year-end holidays. Or, again, John Lepp, maybe just 5 if you're doing it during a summer mailing. And during the summer, of course, people are completely distracted and not necessarily responding to charity appeals. That'd be it, Johnny boy.
That's good. And there's, to that point, there is a lot of nuance in this stuff that you're talking about, especially with the warm list. That's why the answers you got, Tom, were so like, well, it could be this and it could be that, and maybe it's like this, and maybe it's like
Oh,
that.
no, I got answers all over the place, but they always came down to people that could actually do some serious analysis of their list.
Mm.
I don't talk to those. I don't talk to charities in that age range usually. I
Mm.
mean, in the last few years, I've had a couple of mega charities, and they were fun to play around with, but most of the time I'm working with much smaller groups.
Mhm. No, but this is good. It's important, as I always say to people, there's no definitives. There are very few definitives in this work, and you have to kind of go with the flow that this is the truth of the work. If you're doing good appeals, like you said, Tom, if you're actually not doing good appeals, but you're actually making sure you're saying thanks and showing the impact of these gifts before you ask again, that's proper fundraising. But yeah, to right section of your list, the right segment of your list, you could get a 30%, 40% response rate, even higher in some cases, if you do it really, really, really good. So this is brilliant, Tom. Thank you very much for this stuff. Do you have any final thoughts, or you just want us to log off?
Oh, hey, John, my pleasure. It's
Oh,
fun to have a succinct problem to work on. You know, here are 5 buckets, fill these buckets. What would you put in these buckets? And you said originally your original request was, what have you learned lately?
mhm.
And it turned out what I was learning lately sometimes was new stuff, completely new, but many times was stuff I'd learned, and now we see whether people are actually doing it or not. For one reason or another. And that would be like the Colin Wheeldon reverse type stuff. It's like that goes back to 88.
Yeah, it's true. What's it saying about what's old is new again? Is very true in this work.
Yeah, I know there is yeah, right. I'm sure there are many probably back to the Romans.
Oh,
Um,
well, thank you, Tom. I do appreciate this, and I appreciate your time. So thanks for joining all of us, whoever's watching this. Uh, last couple emails. Thank you, and we'll see you.